This anime begins by showing a young child experiencing abuse from his father. The child is often beaten and verbally abused without reason. Although he still has a mother, her attitude is just as indifferent as her husband's, showing no concern for the child's fate. Several years later, the child named Mimori is now in high school, where he is now on a school study tour on a bus. At the same time, a girl named Ayaka, who is the class president, is being harassed by a student named Oyamada. Everyone on the bus is disturbed by Oyamada's rude behavior, but the teacher who should be supervising is asleep and doesn't care. Because of this, Mimori thinks about intervening but decides against it, feeling that his efforts would be useless since he is just an unremarkable student in class. Shortly after, Ayaka becomes increasingly annoyed by Oyamada's harassment. Finally, Mimori can't stand it anymore and stands up to defend Ayaka, telling Oyamada to stop bothering her. Unfortunately, Mimori is disregarded and no one listens to it. Even though he is actually scared, Mimori cannot stand seeing Ayaka being continually harassed. Because of this, Oyamada then shifts his target and attacks Mimori. Until suddenly, Takuto, the most popular student in class, asks Oyamada to stop bothering Ayaka. Seeing this, everyone sits back down, though Oyamada is still dissatisfied and continues to kick the seat of the student in front of him. At the same time, the teacher finally wakes up and angrily orders Oyamada to stop, not wanting any trouble if someone does the unthinkable because of his actions. After being scolded like that, the atmosphere finally calms down. Meanwhile, Mimori feels regret for trying to be a hero and thinks he should have just stayed quiet as usual. However, without realizing it, the atmosphere in the bus changes and they are suddenly transported to a different place. At the same time, a woman appeared above them, claiming to be a goddess named Vicious, and said that they had been summoned to another world, the kingdom of Alien. Vicious also explains that 200 years ago, aliens summoned heroes to defeat the previous Demon King, and because the Demon King has risen again, they have been summoned here because these students are the prospective heroes who will defeat the Demon King. Hearing that, none of the students believed it, and they thought they were just dreaming. However, when they checked, their phone signals and belongings were missing. As the students began to panic, the teacher told them to stay calm. Meanwhile, the teacher, who turned out to be a pervert, immediately believed Vicious because he was attracted to her appearance. On the other hand, Mimori looks around and pinches himself to make sure he is not dreaming. At the same time, Takuto, who always appears cool, finally steps in, revealing that he doesn't want to be ordered around by Vicious, especially because they were transported without consent and now have to fight the Demon King. Hearing that, Vicious explained that they had no other choice because there were only two ways to return to the real world. The first way was to use the heart of the Great Demon King, and the second way was to take the evil element released by the Great Demon King after being defeated and put it into the necklace worn by Vicious. Therefore, they had to fight the Demon King to return. After that, Vicious knelt before them, and Ayaka finally asked if they, as ordinary humans without special powers, could defeat the Demon King. Vicious then explained that those who were summoned to this world were not like other humans because they had special abilities. To prove it, Vicious then ordered the guards to bring a prisoner before them. The prisoner turned out to be an ordinary human who was ragged and unkempt, but suddenly, the prisoner was eaten by a demon. Fortunately, before the demon could rampage, Vicious immediately burned it with her magic. The students who witnessed this event finally believed that all of this was real and they were not dreaming. They were then instructed to take turns testing their powers by holding a magic ball. When they tried it, most of them had a bright light, including Oyamada, who even ranked A. When it was Takuto's turn, his light was so bright that it illuminated the entire room and the ball shattered, placing him in rank S. Additionally, Ayaka also ranked S, making Vicious very happy because this summoning was very powerful. Shortly after, it was Mimori's turn, and when he placed his hand on the magic ball, the light produced was very dim and a different color. As the result, Vicious showed an indifferent face and quickly asked the next participant to step forward. Even when Mimori asked about his rank, he was simply ignored. Because of this treatment, Mimori felt very disappointed, as he always felt like a background character both in the real world and in the isekai. Unlike Mimori, Yasu, one of the students who was often bullied, actually found a miracle in the isekai and ranked in the dark hero category, making him arrogant. After everything was finished, they could see each other's statistics. Unfortunately, Mimori's statistics were lower than the other students, and he was ranked E, explaining why Vicious was upset when discovering his rank. However, Mimori had special skills, namely abnormal skills consisting of paralyze, poison, and sleep, each at level 1. While he was looking at his statistics, suddenly, Vicious called Mimori to step forward and took him to a place with a magic spell. At that moment, Vicious explained that Mimori was the lowest among the others and usually only became a burden. Therefore, Vicious would hold a ceremony to cast Mimori into the ruins where useless people were sent. At that time, Mimori was also given a chance to rejoin if he could survive in the ruins. Hearing that, Mimori became scared because he didn't want to be discarded. So Mimori panicked and said that he had special skills that could be useful. However, Vicious said that the special skills of E-ranked individuals are usually useless, and Mimori felt sad upon hearing this. At that moment, Yasu came to him, and Mimori immediately remembered that he had once helped Yasu when he was being bullied. Unfortunately, Yasu's arrival was not to defend but to laugh and mock him. When the process was about to begin, Mimori was given a special item that could be useful in the ruins. At the same time, Ayaka felt pity and tried to stop Vicious, as she couldn't let her friend be discarded just like that. However, Ayaka was struck unconscious by Vicious, who continued the ceremony and asked everyone to watch the disposal process. Mimori could not accept the treatment he received, so he used his skill to attack Vicious, but it was unsuccessful. Takuto then tried using his special skill, which made him appear more capable. In contrast, Mimori appeared to be the most useless person, as if his life was a mistake. In the end, Mimori could only cry, remembering his childhood when he was beaten by his father and could only remain silent and cry. Eventually, Mimori threatened Vicious and everyone who allowed him to be discarded. Not long after, Mimori arrived at the ruins, where he stood in a damp and dark place. Mimori couldn't even open his statistic. Therefore, he tried using the special item given by Vicious earlier. It turned out that the item could function as a flashlight and was suitable for a place that felt more like a cave than ruins. When he walked a short distance, Mimori immediately found a split skull, giving him chills. At the same time, Mimori realized that something was watching him, and sure enough, there was a monster behind him. Because of this, Mimori felt terrified as the monster had the intent to kill, so he immediately ran from the monster. After that, Mimori cried again, but this time not out of sadness or happiness, but out of frustration and anger because he had always been treated differently throughout his life. In the dark, Mimori stumbled and quickly used his paralyzed skill on the monster because he didn't want to be killed. Fortunately, his attack worked, even though Vicious had previously said that his skill was weak. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Mimori ran again. But in front of him was another smaller monster that was just as terrifying as the previous one because it also had a strong killing intent. Recalling what happened to the previous monster, Mimori decided to use his skill again, and it worked. Even when Mimori tried using his poison skill, it also worked. Seeing this, Mimori became suspicious that Vicious might have lied about his skill. However, Mimori's magic points were depleted, and he didn't know how to replenish them. While he was confused, the large monster he had paralyzed earlier had broken free from the effect and started chasing him again. Even though he was surrounded, Mimori refused to give up and was determined to survive the ruins. It turned out that Mimori's MP was almost depleted because he had used it to activate the flashlight and attack Vicious earlier. At that moment, Mimori knew that he was in danger but was forced to use the paralyzed skill again. However, it turned out that Mimori could not use the same skill on the same monster. So, Mimori was forced to use his last MP on the sleep skill followed by poison, realizing that his skills could be combined. Eventually, his MP ran out, leaving Mimori confused about what to do next. Oddly enough, Mimori could still use his skills even with no MP left. All the smaller monsters stopped after being hit by the paralyzed skill, but the larger ones kept coming. Mimori was almost at his limit and started feeling dizzy and nearly fainted from the effects of MP exhaustion. If he kept pushing, Mimori would collapse. Despite this, Mimori refused to give up, until a miracle happened when the first monster hit by poison died and gave him a massive amount of XP, leveling Mimori up by hundreds. Along with that, Mimori's MP was fully restored. Therefore, Mimori continued using his skills on the monsters, realizing that as long as there were monsters, he could survive and gain XP in the ruins. Finally, Mimori faced all the monsters, and gradually, the ones hit by paralyze and poison died. This also leveled up his skills, with the paralyze skill reaching level 2, allowing Mimori to attack multiple enemies at once, which was very helpful when fighting many monsters. While in the ruins, Mimori learned that his skills were ineffective against gods, but in this place, his abnormal skills were very useful. Mimori also considered the monsters in the ruins as material for leveling up, using his skills on all the monsters he encountered. After that, Mimori just had to wait for the poison monsters to die, although the rate at which he leveled up was truly absurd. Eventually, the monsters that saw this became afraid and decided to flee. After that, Mimori continued his journey, picking up the belongings of outcasts who had turned into skeletons, praying for their souls to rest in peace. During his journey, Mimori suddenly felt so hungry that he nearly fainted. At the same time, he encountered another monster and immediately attacked it because he didn't want to take any risks. Eventually, Mimori desperately needed food and drink. He was so hungry that he hallucinated and thought the monster was a bird to be eaten. Unable to resist any longer, Mimori recklessly tried to eat the monster's corpse, but its body was too tough. When Mimori tried to pry out its eyes to eat, he found that these monsters couldn't be eaten because their bodies were very acidic. In utter desperation, Mimori suddenly realized that his item pouch had changed color. When he tried using magic again, the pouch became heavier. Upon inspection, he found meat and drinks inside. Although he was confused about their origin, Mimori devoured everything. Days passed in the ruins, but Mimori still hadn't found a way out. Nevertheless, Mimori was able to gain more XP, although he felt it was very cruel because he had committed a massacre of monsters. However, his heart did not waver even after killing many monsters. Instead, Mimori remembered his childhood again. At that time, Mimori was often abused by his parents until he was eventually saved by his uncle and aunt. Since then, Mimori finally experienced kindness and peace. His uncle and aunt even taught him how to live a good and compassionate life. However, Mimori's current behavior was quite the opposite, as the gentle teachings from his uncle and aunt did not apply in that world. Strangely, Mimori felt a certain pleasure in being able to slaughter many monsters. Eventually, Mimori felt like he was the coolest main character of a psychopathic story. After killing many monsters inside the ruins, Mimori's level reached 900, and he continued his journey to find a way out. After walking a short distance, Mimori encountered another monster, which had a rather terrifying appearance. But for Mimori, it was nothing, and he immediately used his paralyzed skill combined with poison, causing the monster to die instantly. After walking quite far, Mimori realized that the atmosphere and buildings around him still looked good and more structured than in the previous cave. Eventually, Mimori found a room with 2 corpses in it. After examining their condition, Mimori concluded that they had died of starvation because there were no wounds on their bodies. He then took all their belongings and found a valuable crystal pouch. After praying for them, Mimori asked for permission to take the crystals. Mimori continued his journey and reached the 25th room. When it opened, it looked the same, but this time there was only 1 corpse and a piece of paper that could be read, which surprised Mimori as he could understand the writing in this world. It turned out that the man was a dark hero named Anglin, who was also forcibly summoned by Vicious and discarded in these ruins. Mimori also learned that Anglin left everything he owned to anyone who wanted to escape these ruins. This made Mimori even angrier at Vicious for her evil deeds, which exceeded those of the Demon King. Therefore, Mimori had no desire to save this world. He only wanted revenge on Vicious. Mimori then checked the contents of Anglin's bag and found a book of forbidden techniques. It also contained many magic spells and recipes for making potions, which would be very useful. Mimori immediately took the book and found a scroll with notes. The notes indicated that the scroll contained forbidden spells, but Mimori couldn't read it. Even so, he was sure that the scroll would be very useful for fighting Vicious someday. Before leaving, Mimori noticed blood scribbles in the book, warning to beware of the soul-eating monster, as everyone who had encountered it had lost. Mimori then continued his journey and found a blue door that seemed to be the way out. However, the door required a gem to open, and Mimori was sure that the gem was nearby, possibly on the soul-eating monster if assembled like a puzzle. With Mimori's statistics now reaching level 1200, he felt confident he could defeat the Soul Eater. It turned out that the soul-eating monster was at the end of the corridor, with a terrifying form resembling a human face. On its forehead, there was a gem that Mimori probably needed to open the door. When he was about to attack the monster, Mimori was shot first because the monster was very strong and fast. This made it difficult for Mimori, who could not use his skills without chanting and had a limited usage range. While Mimori was still thinking of a way to fight, the monster moved again and opened its mouth, producing human-shaped monsters. It turned out that these monsters were people whose souls had been eaten by the soul-eating monster, bearing the same facial expressions as before their death. This made Mimori even more frightened and desperate, causing the monster to laugh at him. Shortly after, the human-shaped monsters managed to chase Mimori very closely. With no other choice, Mimori used the paralyzed skill on them but couldn't bring himself to use poison because he felt like he was poisoning other people. Thus, Mimori screamed in despair, making the monster even happier. The soul-eating monster then vomited again, producing many human clones to surround Mimori, who looked increasingly depressed, crying and screaming for help, but no one heard him. The monster laughed loudly at seeing Mimori in such a state. However, suddenly, Mimori gave a sly smile and used the paralyzed skill on the soul-eating monster. It turned out that Mimori was pretending to be desperate to make the monster careless and forget to dodge. From the beginning, Mimori's hand had been directed at the monster's face. When he had the chance, Mimori immediately used the poison skill on all the clones and approached the terrified monster. Now, it was Mimori's turn to laugh at the monster and keep using poison until the soul-eating monster finally died. Because of this, the souls that had been eaten were finally freed. Apparently, these spirits had been watching over and protecting Mimori all this time. After that, they thanked Mimori. At that moment, Anglin also appeared and asked Mimori to defeat Vicious before they vanished. Actually, Mimori did not feel obligated to fulfill their request, as what mattered to him was pursuing what he wanted. Mimori then took the gem from the monster's forehead and placed it on the door. Finally, Mimori managed to exit the ruins. Moral lesson from the story: sometimes, standing up for what's right means getting sent to monster-filled ruins. But hey, at least you'll level up. Remember, if life gives you demons, just poison them until you feel better.